good? Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you guys are rested from all the content and the knowledge you'll share here today. So I'm Mauricio Magaldi. I work as the head of product for Midnight Protocol. You heard from me, our CFO, and how to be talk about that a little bit. I'm here with Trevor Caverco, which coincidentally was a guest on my show on Block Drops podcast not long ago.
Proud alumni.
Yeah, so super good to play this back. The topic is future digital identity and sovereignty. So I think the first thing is what's your definition for this, and what do you see this in terms of underpinning future digital assets?
Well, yeah, no, and first off, great to connect again, man, and everybody check out the show.
Good show.
My quick, just to zoom out, my background is kind of one-trick pony in Web3, so anytime I stray away, it doesn't go too well. But I was super early in the Ethereum scene in Toronto and eventually started my own project in 2017 called Polymath. It was an early tokenization network. And I'm seeing the RWA guys come up and they're taking it to the next level, which is really cool. And fully decentralized it. Charles Hoskinson and I built an L1 that we evolved into called Polymesh. And we fully decentralized it. And it kind of freed me up to do a new passion of mine, which was AI, machine learning, and AI data. And that's really what I sunk my teeth into a couple of years ago. A friend of mine is a master's grad from Waterloo in machine learning and just inspired me about where the puck was moving in big data. Because I remember big data was a big thing 10 years ago and it kind of died out, and now it's even bigger now. So now I'm working on a project called Sapien, which is, we call ourselves like a data foundry, just like you have chip foundries like TSMC in Taiwan that produce chips. Well, we're a data foundry in the same sense. And so that's kind of our main focus right now is how data has become the big bottleneck in the world, not just for AI, but for everything.
Good quality data, right?
Exactly. And
not many data.
Yeah, because the problem is I use the example of like an iceberg. So all of these big models that you hear about today, the OpenAIs, Geminis, Mistrals, etc., they're all training on the same data. They're all training on the same open, free internet data, and they're kind of like running out of open internet data to train on.
They're being incestuous now because they're training on the results of their former training, so repetitive patterns, addictive to them.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's happening now is there's just a new, money's not stopping, demand for performance and better benchmarking is not stopping. So where are you going to get your edge? So all of these foundational models are turning to custom data solutions. They're trying to find proprietary data sets that they can tap into to get a little edge in their model performance and to train just higher quality data on. So what's interesting is, all of these big models now, it started out with like human powered RLHF. So they put industrial scale amount of humans in these data sets to structure it better. And I use the example of like a supply chain. So data is a commodity just like anything else. And it starts out as raw, just like crude oil in the ground, raw data. And then you have to refine it, you have to structure it, you have to organize it. That's like refining the oil. And then and only then can you put it in your car as gasoline and train on it in the example of AI. And so the supply chain is kind of how we think about AI data. And it doesn't even stop with training, because then you have to run inference on it and then you have to fine tune it after that. And the price per datum changes at every step of the way. And so anyways, what we're excited about is just unlocking new data, new specialized proprietary custom data. That's where the puck is moving, and we're trying to like help any model get access to that data.
Is there any overlaps you see on that particular paradigm with the ability to prove things about the data, including identity? Because there is a lot on the space of the internet data that is either very personal data that has even regulatory implications, and the ability to exercise that on, say, let's go with the word of the day, right? AI agents that are highly personalized without necessarily compromising your personal underlying data is important. So how does that play with the ability to safely prove who you are, and then reap the benefits of all that intelligence that comes with good quality data out of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. Even to just contextualize it a bit more. So for us as a because we pontificate a lot about the high level AI trends and stuff, but we're also like really in the trenches in terms of talking to real businesses and real enterprises. And the interesting situation you see these companies in now is they're sitting on these gold mines of proprietary private data. And so, for example, JP Morgan has 120 petabytes of private on-prem data that no foundational model has access to yet. And JP Morgan, they've actually said this in an earnings report, they're never going to sell access to that data. And the reason for that is because if AI replaces everything they do, the only edge they'll have left is their data. That's the only thing they'll have. So they're not going to sell access to it. Some companies are. So if you're not JP Morgan and you don't have 120 petabytes of data of high quality, good financial data, let's say you're Reddit.
Battle test the data.
Battle test the data.
To regulators everywhere in the world as well.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you're a smaller company like Reddit. Well, maybe you're not going to monetize it by building a model, a vertical enterprise model in the same way. Maybe you're just going to sell access to it for $60 million a year to OpenAI, which is what Reddit does. So what are we seeing? It's a new business model. All these companies that have data can either sell access to it or they can build a model and monetize their data by building, we call it vertical enterprise models. I'm based in San Francisco, and the transition from like the Y Combinator, what they're looking for, what do you call it, a search for startups they put out, is
the annual letter put out. Yeah.
It is. There's one thing they look for now, literally one thing: vertical AI companies. That's it. If you're a master's student at a good university and you have a vertical AI company, you will get into Y Combinator pretty much. And what's interesting is it kind of like evolving from the current SaaS story, which has been hundreds of billions of dollars over the last couple of decades, vertical SaaS. And it's not just Silicon Valley, it's like big private equity companies now rolling up these vertical enterprise companies. That is changing because now all of those companies are, we think, getting replaced slowly by vertical AI companies that can do everything that these vertical SaaS companies do, but better. And so where do we come in? We come in by helping these enterprise dinosaurs that have proprietary data tap into it. And we say, we can help you structure that data where you can actually leverage it and use it to build a model, because we think, a lot of people disagree, but we think there's going to be a lot of models. Sam Altman thinks there's going to be one. And it could be true. He thinks there's going to be one, and it's going to be his, and it's going to be, don't even bother. He said this. He said, don't even bother starting an AI tool because we're going to swallow it all up. But that's not really how we're seeing where the puck is moving. Like, you look at companies like Harvey, they are, I think, the biggest vertical AI company now, a few $1 billion market cap. And what they do is specialized law models, vertical enterprise law models. And how is their model that's vertical going to be better than just what OpenAI has? Well, because they have access to better data. And so I think that's what we're going to see. All these little green shoots of better data pools, they're going to have their own vertical models. And if you have a specific problem and you don't need 90% accuracy, you don't need 99% accuracy, you need 99.999% accuracy because it's like a life-saving medical treatment or an important legal case, you are going to use a vertical enterprise model from someone who has the best data and not OpenAI.
Well, there's a cost component as well, because if you have specialized data with specialized models, you don't have to wander around to find a model, right? You don't have to iterate as many times to find patterns or repetitions that can be trained and inferred, whereas the generic model will have to go around many times, in probably not as a specialized data set and not as a specialized model to reach potentially maybe the same results, right? So that curation is probably central to the vertical model because it's not generic, it has to be specific, and therefore shorten that. So maybe the multi-model verticalized model is more cost effective, trying to solve for everybody.
Yeah, and we're seeing, you guys know, like, what do you call them? DEX aggregators. So it's like 1 inch, and they aggregate. They're like a layer on top of all the other DEXs, and it's better to, it's like Kayak or Google Flights. You just go to one place. So it's happening with models now. It's just with Alex Atala. He's the founder of Open Router. He's also the founder of OpenSea. And so we're seeing these like uh, aggregators for models now too, which is kind of to your point. So you'll have all these vertical models, and then the router will tell you where to go, which is super cool. But just to back up to your earlier point, like at Sapien, we're trying to help companies get special data. And so, for example, we had one of our first customers was a pancreatic cancer researcher who needed to bootstrap a network of radiologists, highly skilled, highly specialized humans. This is in contrast to the first version of data labeling, which is what companies like Scale AI did very well, which was like low level, overseas, this is a stop sign, this is a baby, this is a car, labeling computer vision. Yeah. That's not happening as much anymore. It's these models need better, higher skilled PhD level data. So we're seeing that. We had to have like a bootstrap network of radiologists to label MRI imaging data of like a cancer cell or a tumor cell. And that is where like all of these models actually are great employers. They will pay you for your knowledge. And we actually see that as a different future where it's not dystopian. It's actually like, oh, wow, you don't need to drive an Uber anymore. Robots do that. But the models that power the robots need your skills to be better in some certain way. And you can like, from your Android phone, log in and earn between $5,000 and $5,000 an hour by structuring data for a model. And so that's like a future that we see happening.
I'm obliged to ask, like if a PhD is helping train and label and fine tune the data in the model, are they working themselves out of a job in the future, or are they throwing themselves into being better augmented professionals? What is that? What's the fork in the road for that?
If AI replaces everything and everybody, we don't really care anymore because we're post abundance at that point. So I don't think too much about that problem, but we think there's a transition. Yeah, there is, and I think there's a long way to go between now and that. So for me, it's a matter of these models are just going to make life so much better, and the better we can. It's almost like you can take your PhD that you may be kind of writing papers with that no one reads. How much of an impact are you making? Or you can take your PhD knowledge and like help make a model marginally better that could save a life in the future for generations to come. To me, that's like a more noble thing. And it's a real benefit to society as well, I think.
Well, considering that we are scientifically close to escape velocity from death, given life extension and transhumanism technologies that we're seeing, that will be a problem for future us in this situation. Now, let me try and steer us back to a little bit of the panel topic, and you're dealing with specialized types of data, and therefore potentially even personal data that are involved in these data sets. Like you said, JP Morgan has not only transactional data, they have data about their clients and their financial behaviors, which arguably is the most sensitive behavior we can take into account.
One other quick fact on that. So JP Morgan, I said 120 petabytes. ChatGPT 4.0, as of very recently, the most modern advanced model, trained on 4 petabytes. So when I say the iceberg, like open internet data is like 4 petabytes, or it's more, but that's what they trained on for that model. Just one company. So, and that's just what we know about. So like these models have a lot of upside just from tapping into existing data sets that we don't have. I digress, but yeah.
No, that's fine. I think my point is, how do we, if the data, and this is more on the GDPR style considerations, right? If the data belongs to the user, it doesn't belong to necessarily JP Morgan. Maybe the transaction data does, but the individual data and behavior associated with that is the user, right? How do we ensure that if that's where we're going, that one, the owner of that data, and JP Morgan just being the fiduciary of that data, that we can only do that upon consent, proper consent. Because these deep web data sources are important, but the ownership of the data is not necessarily the entity that's storing it, especially if you take into account particulars like GDPR, etc. So how do we give the people back the power to decide what the custodian of their data will do with that in that scenario where you're playing?
Well, there's solutions, really exciting projects that are solving that exact problem. So us specifically, we're more focused on like the boring enterprises have data. Let's help them build their own vertical model and on to the next one. But in terms of like, and there's more like, movie IP, like when a model trains on data, is that something, what's the legal, is it a new training thing, or is it just learning, you know what I mean? But in terms of like getting data, there's two projects that we're close with, like Vanna, where you can actually monetize and consent into earning rewards for your data. And also Grass is another one where it kind of uses your compute to help, or access to your browser to help crawl the web that other folks pay for. And people do this anyways on you for free, but it's finally a way that you get compensated for doing it. So I think there's a couple steps there. It's like, A, do you consent or not consent? And then A, if you do consent, are you getting rewarded for it? And so I'm seeing, it's not our particular use case, but we're seeing some interesting projects like looking to do that exact thing.
In that same vein, I mean,
it's grass.io. Check them out. And Vanna, yeah. Data DAOs is kind of the concept where you have kind of like data pools that you can contribute to, and then you can monetize them through them.
Well, this is an important distinction. We're used to discussing, the product is free, the service is new, the service is free, the product. In that particular regard, obviously monetizing that is important. We're also seeing the rise of the AI agent, and AI agent with an agent, and one call the other. We had a big panel here earlier today. How far off from being able to play with identifying agents and their interaction? Because if they're making money off of a data set and that's been consented and being rewarded, there is not only a data flow, but there is a revenue flow from the benefits that the agent is yielding and the data sources it's using to make that decision and earning that yield. Do you see that as something that we can potentially enforce by combining that with blockchain and the reward mechanism you just described, or is this something that this is so far removed from absolutely having sovereignty over our own data where we are on the internet these days that there's no clawing back from that?
I don't know. I was always very open about my personal data, but as time has gone on, I've become a little more aware of what's out there, being a little more private, not giving all these apps like unadulterated access to all your everything in life.
Niantic, are you hearing this?
But yeah, I know it's an interesting like paradox. It's kind of like it's kind of like the devil's wager. It's like, do you want access to this magical power? Well, you have
how
to give
much
up
of your
data.
soul are you willing to give away for this?
And yeah, I think it's just like white hat, black hat. Like as much as it's getting easier for nefarious corporations to use your data, there's also white hat technological improvements that can protect that. To be honest, for me personally, like I don't really care with Google having my info that much. What are they going to do other than sell you products that you want personalization for? It's more like, if you want some sovereign nation to do it, that might be something I'd be more concerned about than a company. Because I actually like, the personalization. Like I like having ads that are, based on me. And I think there's new, like with ZK and new frontier technologies. There is ways where you can maybe have your cake and eat it too, where you can have like custom personalized experiences on the web without giving up your personal information.
I'm glad you said ZK.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I mean, there's right now, most of ZK or is aimed at scaling or roll-ups or whatever. I'm gonna just throw Midnight in the Midnight hat in the ring. we're going to see transactional data bound by ZK and behavioral data bound by ZK. And that could be the compromise between having access to high quality data, curated, but not necessarily exposing the underlying data, only the information in context, which context is important for all these models. So if you can have that without necessarily compromising that, then maybe that's a way for people like you who are starting to enjoy the benefits of personalization without necessarily having to open and sharing everything to Google about your emails. And at this point, Google should be able to write its own blockchain for the amount of documentation that they have in Google Docs.
It's an exciting time for privacy, actually, and you guys are a leader here. But we're seeing, because blockchains, we love how transparent they are, but that also is a problem if you care about confidentiality. It's a problem if you care about privacy. If you're a founder, you get tracked very easily on chain, and so that's a bug and a feature at the same time. But we're starting to see, new protocols and new architectures come out where it's like we're using trusted execution environments on your phone, and that's a way to maintain privacy in certain scenarios. We're seeing, fully homomorphic encryption, which is another way where you can kind of encrypt data and still glean information from it in a very impressive mathematical way that has not been possible until recently. And then there's things like ZK, which is another kind of permutation of that. So it's complicated. There's a mosaic of different tools, and there's no connective tissue to kind of bring it all together yet. But I think it is an exciting time for privacy.
I think more important than being able to be private, it's being able to select when you want to share. We kind of lost a little bit. Web 2 made us very comfortable. Just click the checkboxes just so we can have a nice email for free or whatever the case was. And the trade-offs were not known at the time. We didn't have the consuming technology that we have now with AI. Right? So the fact that we can now combine some of these things and even the healthcare use case you mentioned, I think it's super powerful. If we can actually use that to prevent future diseases, it's we never had this in the history of humanity. So that's one of the, maybe that's where the compromise comes in, and we can absolutely have the option of privacy.
You can go too far if you're just a maximalist of privacy. Okay, well, we're not going to have large enough data sets to do cellular. We're not going to be able to cure diseases using protein folding and things where you need a lot of personal data. So maybe we just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we say let's focus on ways through ZK where you can say, or anonymized data where it's I'll share some of my data for the benefit of everyone, but I also get to maintain privacy provably on chain, so I know it's private.
And potentially get rewarded because
and
monetization of data is this utopia that we're going to be on the internet.
Reddit has all this data and it's selling it. Well, not all of us have data, but no one's paying us for it.
Well, I mean? Yeah, that's the point. Monetizing
that's
data
valuable,
is easy
even more valuable.
If you're a honeypot like Twitter or any other social platform, but the user is the product. That's the whole enchilada is you don't get any benefit, and the funny thing is that you pay for it. If you're on the checkmark program, you're paying to have your data sold to somebody else, which is completely mind-blowing, right? I was joking about Niantic, but it turns out that looking for a Pokemon in your virtual world inside your house actually mapped your house. We could do that without actually exposing that.
The Roombas, I think. That's why Amazon bought a Roomba, the vacuum cleaner. No, I think that's actually why they did it.
Maybe that too.
The vision data for people's houses. So
the thing, Niantic had so many access in your cell phone. Every door was open. So if you're hunting if they needed to map a space in a particular area, they would put a rare Pokemon there, so everybody would go there and data points would be collected. So we got very comfortable, we got very careless, and maybe now it's time to just go back and claw that soccer ranking that we deserve. Any parting words? That we're on time here.
No, thanks everybody for hanging out.
Yeah, thank you. And go check Sapien, go check Midnight, and we'll be here all
The
this.
game.sapien.io. You can pull that out on your phone and check out what we do. Game.sapien.io.
And midnight.network. Thank you.
Great.